Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another Ace Your Assessment podcast with Eleanor. And today we've got someone with us, Dr. Tina Hart. Tina, you are a senior lecturer in law at DMU, and you have been for a few years. You are involved with tort. This is level 5, isn't it? And yeah, you also do law medicine as well. I think is it level 6?
Yeah, that's right.
And then English and European legal systems.
Yeah, that level
First, yeah, so first years. Brilliant. So, and your research interests are in the field of ownership of human biological matter and the patenting process. I mean, I think students would have many questions about this.
Yeah, no, it's a really fascinating subject. And to be honest, in previous institutions, I taught intellectual property law, and my passion really is for patenting law. And I'm quite interested in this notion of somebody can go in for medical treatment. Most of the cases were decided in the United States, but you have a situation where somebody goes in for medical treatment and their cells are harvested. Examples that people will know about from the media are, for example, the story of Henrietta Lacks. There's been John Moore against the University of California. And so you have a situation where their cells were unique and so could be used for all manner of things. And so you have a situation where Moore's cells were made into a cell line, which was patented, which earned the University of California something in the region of $3 billion in licensing agreements. And of course, because of the no property rule, he got none of that. He couldn't sue in conversion. He was able to sue on the basis of breach of the doctor-patient relationship. And so I think there's all kinds of reasons why I feel my thesis was very much an argument about why individuals should have ownership. And it's not just about the money, it's also about control. And I would say it's also about autonomy. So although we've not really had cases like that in England and Wales, but what we have had is that we've had scandals where people haven't known what has been done with things that have been removed from them in operations. And because they don't have ownership, they haven't been able to take action when their biological matter has been misused. The only case where someone has succeeded, if we take the case of Yearworth, and Yearworth is an example, in my view, as to why individuals should have ownership, because in Yearworth, what had happened was the claimants had been advised to store their sperm because they were undergoing cancer treatment, and so they were advised, store your sperm so you can use it afterward. And unfortunately, it wasn't kept at the right temperature; it got destroyed. And so the question is, what is the harm? Well, there's no physical harm, there's no psychiatric harm. You can only sue essentially they succeeded in bailment, but you have to have a property interest to be able to take action. And so in Yearworth, a commercial lawyer will tell you, if you don't have property in something, you may have an interest in something, but if it's not a property interest, if it gets destroyed through somebody's negligence, you can't do anything. So,
oh my goodness. Tina, this is absolutely fascinating. I think even for students, it might be more interesting than what we're going to talk about today.
Sorry. One thing you must never do when you're talking to me is ask me about biological material, because I will tell you what I think.
Tina is absolutely fascinating, honestly. I think even just because it's a very interesting area to
Yeah,
actually research. And no, I'm into autonomy as well, capacity and all that, because of the assisted dying research. So I like to find out such amazing things about others and their own research. And I think our students are going to be fascinated by it. I like that. You probably get many questions now.
yeah. But just if I
Oh,
could just finish about Europe, because I think I've
oh
left it
yes.
halfway.
Oh,
But
please don't.
if
Yes.
I could just say that they succeeded because the Court of Appeal did look at more. And if they had followed more, they would have said no, but they distinguished it.
Mm,
I won't go into the legal reasoning, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the issues as to why somebody like me would argue that individuals should have ownership, because those are the kind of issues. It's not just about someone like Moore wanting to have a share
mm.
of the 3 billion, but it is also about people having control over what, having control over their excised body parts, essentially, and what happens to them. So
Yes.
yes, so that's what my research was on,
Oh,
and I think
absolutely mind-blowing.
you've learned an important lesson. Do not ask too.
No, I love it. I love it, honestly. And students will too. Anyway, hopefully what we're going to be talking about
Back to the
today
matter in hand.
is equally as interesting to our students.
Yeah,
Um, and the topic that you are going to unlock today for us is how to read and use journal articles.
yeah,
Obviously, when you're doing your research, you are now unpacking so many journal articles, and I mean, students will know that by now, probably when they're hearing this, they would have maybe opened a few, and they've had a look around, and now you've got Tina who's going to unpack all of this bit by bit and explain, what is it that they mean for our research, for your assessments, for your work in general, for your writing, essay, problem questions, or otherwise. So, Tina, my first question to you is why do you think this topic or this point, this subject is so important?
well, I think personally, I find reading journal articles really interesting. So, from a personal point of view, um, I find it very useful for my teaching. Um, but I think what students get out of it, there are a number of things that I would list. The first I would say is it's important if we are looking at a new piece of legislation or we're looking at a new case. So sometimes while we're looking at a topic, there'll be a new case that's been handed down. Now, ideally, what you want is for the students to read the whole judgment. And students have a wealth of resources that they can use, particularly if a case gets to the Supreme Court. I mean, I love the fact that Supreme Court judgments are now available on YouTube, because students, they get the head notes from that, they can watch it, and they're not just reading what their lordships are saying, but they get the tone and the sense of why they've come to that particular decision. So students should always start with the primary sources. But when you've got a new case, so for example, I've put on the slide
Should we open the slides then,
yeah,
Tina?
if
Or
we can have,
yeah, okay. But you
yeah.
can talk about it, and I've got the slides myself while I upload this for the students.
Yeah. So where you've got a new case, essentially, as I'm saying, the starting point is to read the judgment, watch the judgment, especially if it's a Supreme Court judgment, read the judgment, watch the judgment. The Supreme Court also has blogs of its judgments. So you read the judgment, but the other thing is that you're getting an academic view. And if it's a brand new judgment, it's not going to be in textbooks yet. And so a good thing to do is to look for a case note on the judgment. So here we have a judgment handed down by the Supreme Court in 2023. So it was February 2023, and hopefully the picture gives you a sense of what happened. So the question here, the point of law in Fern and Board of Trustees of Tate Gallery, the point was whether or not building an extension to the Tate Gallery that allowed visitors to basically look into the apartment of their neighbours. The question was this an actionable nuisance? Was that an unlawful interference? And so the judgment looks at, well, what do we mean by unlawful interference? And is overlooking an unreasonable interference? And so, yes, in a perfect world, I would want the students to read that judgment. I would want them to at least watch it on YouTube and look at the blog. But realistically, the judgment is about, and I have to admit, I read it last year when it was handed down. It's about 100 pages, the main judgment.
Oh my.
The dissenting judgment is also very interesting. And so when you read it, when having looked at it, having had the lecture on it, when you look at a journal article, you get another academic's point of view. So the students will get the tutor's take on the judgment, but it's also useful to get other academics. And so if they look at case notes, that will also help them. So I think I've given you examples of 2 case notes that they might have a look at if they were looking at the Fern decision. And so these are 2 journal articles that I would recommend. Law Quarterly Review has been around since I was a student, so it's well respected. I was a student about 40 years ago, so that's how old it is. But that tells you it has credibility.
But this is law, Tina. So even though, this is the common law jurisdiction, so even though things are changing, we're still old school in very many respects, aren't we?
Yeah. So you've got 2. So James Lee, in his article, he explains, he gives a really good explanation at the extent to which overlooking can amount to private nuisance. It's not in every case where you can look into your neighbour's apartment that's going to be an unreasonable interference. But in this case it was, because it was more or less every time Tate Gallery had visitors. And so James Lee explains this. He highlights the court's decision, but he also talks about the implications of the decisions. And that's what we want students to do when they read cases. We don't want them to just say, okay, well, that's what the judge said. What we want them to do is say, well, not just what they said, so this is the law, but why? Why did they decide that? What other cases did they look at? But also, what are the implications? And so Lee does that in his article. He looks at the implications, but he also, when you read it, he also highlights that in some areas there are certain uncertainties. So it's good for that. If we look at Wennett's note, she's looking at it more from the, I don't want to go as far as to say the human rights perspective, but she is looking at whether or not there are other remedies that could have been used. So she looks at whether or not they could have used misuse of private information or harassment. So then that gets the students to think that, okay, this is a case that we're doing in nuisance, but in what other areas of law? Because we want students not to think about subjects just like in boxes. We want them to see that a dispute has other implications and there could be other remedies.
And like you said, Tina, you're looking at what the judgment said, you're looking at all of these journal articles, but actually, what we want students also to do is develop that critical analysis, isn't it? Because they will develop their own view, they will be able to question even a judgment or what a judge said or why did they say it, because usually they say why they said set the decision that they set. But I mean, can we talk then about, or sit with this for a moment and talk about the benefits of reading journal articles, in linking it to what you just said about these two, because there are different views that can be come through in a journal article for students to get to grips with a particular issue or a particular area of law quicker than just by reading cases.
Yeah. So certainly what it should encourage them to do is to question and look at the implications of the decision. But also, if we look at a way to help their cognitive development, but also a way to help them analyze and think things through. So why have judges come to a decision? But also the context. What was the context? So another set of cases that we look at in tort is we look at duty of care, and a lot of duty of care cases, if not all of them, are decided against a background of policy. What was the underlying policy? So if we take into account the litigation that followed the Hillsborough disaster, for example, and we look at the Alcock decision, then what a journal article will do, what a series of journal articles will do, is that they will draw all of that out. They will highlight for the student that, you know what, there were underlying concerns here. This was a case where you have 96 people who have been crushed to death and their loved ones have suffered psychiatric injury. How is the court going to decide on, how is the court going to have boundaries in deciding how many of those victims of pure psychiatric harm are going to be able to succeed? And so what good journal article writers will do is draw issues like that out. They will draw out, as I've mentioned, the implications, but also in tort, we look at another area that I'm quite fascinated by, and it's another area that I would advise you not to ask me about because I will bore you. But another area is vicarious liability, and there's a case we look at in tort with Mahmood and Morrison Supermarket, where you had a situation where, despite extensive staff training, you have a member of staff who, customer comes in, asks for some help with something. Not only does the member of staff, not only are they not helpful, they are abusive, and they attack the customer as they go out. And so you have to ask yourselves, well, if we look at the requirements for vicarious liability, was that closely connected to his work? The Supreme Court decided it was. And so, I mean, the vicarious liability, we've drawn back. I mean, that was decided in 2016. But there are a raft of articles on that. Paula Gilliker from Bristol University has written so much on the area, and you sense the concern from her articles, because you can see that she is really concerned about the implications for employers for matters like insurance. And so, again, it's causing the students to think, because I like students to think. I like, when I go through a case with students, I like to say to them, well, what do you think? And especially if they're level 5. I once, and just an anecdote, I once, years and years ago, I was teaching something, and I said to a student, well, what do you think of this decision? And they said, well, the judge said it, so it must be right. I said, what? I said, the only difference between you and that judge is age. In about 20 to 30 years' time, you could be that judge. And they laughed. But you need, I need students to understand that it's not too early for them to be critical. Yes, understand the law. Yes, say this is what the law is and this is the reason, but you can question it. And I think reading journal articles gives them not just the permission, but hopefully it gives them the confidence to say, right, okay, academics have said that that decision is, well, I won't use the word that's in my head, but academics have said that decision is not quite right. Therefore, and also let's not forget, I know that a majority of our students want to practice, but let's not forget that some of our students may be interested in an academic career, and so they will want to write. And so if they the more they read, the more they will think, I can do this. I used to, in a previous institution, I used to set a case note as part of an assessment. I used to say, right, we're looking at this area. Here's a series of case notes on this. Now you write one, because, this is going to be you in a few years' time, if that's the kind of career that you want. But I think, sorry, I've gone off the point. What I wanted to get back to is reading journal articles does enforce that and enhance that ability to critically analyze something.
No, I don't think that you went off the grid at all, because this is important for students. I mean, I think what we're trying to really hammer down here is the importance of reading journal articles, and then being able to even spot the ones that are not that good, that great, or that that they stand on their own. Because like you said, a student saying, well, if the judge said it, it must be so. Well, you usually have an odd number of judges in a Supreme Court case, and very often three of them, if you've got a five panel of five, you'll have two on one side of the fence and three on the other side of the fence. And then perhaps even two of those three on that side of the fence, if it weren't for this teeny tiny itty bitty thing that was part of the evidence or something along those lines, they would have been on the other side of the fence, and therefore creating the majority for the decision that would have, tipped the balance the other way. So I think it is very important that you're going into the detail of this, because reading journal articles gets you, I think, quicker into the mindset and perspectives of other people that are in touch with that area of law, because that area of law might not be that knowledgeable to them. So they get a foot in the door, as it were, to get to grips with the notions, with the definitions, a lot quicker than they would if they were just to struggle in reading the case themselves, trying to make their own decisions. So we're not saying that's not a shortcut, as it were, depending on your own research and why you're using the journal article in the first place. It is down to you to just help yourself make a better judgment and your own decision, and question even your own beliefs. We're hoping that journal articles will do as well, or
Yeah,
just question the authors. I mean, question judges, question yourself.
yeah, yeah.
So
Because
yeah,
you need the background. You need to know what was the background. And when we're looking at the implications, we need to look at the social economic background. We need to look at the political implications, the political background as well. So I just
mm,
think I just think it gives students the ability to think about things a bit more critically. Um,
exactly. That's very interesting. No, very good points, Tina.
yeah.
Um, what about analyzing? You know, what do journal articles do for the ability to analyze for students? Because I think you've got one of your slides on this point, isn't it?
So I had supporting the ability to
Yeah,
analyze. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So question judges as why have they come to that decision? And so I'd mentioned the Hillsborough litigation um, before.
Yeah.
Again, you have a situation where duty of care as a concept was being developed. When we get to the high watermark in 1982, um, with cases like Junior Books and Vici and McLaughlin
Mm,
and O'Brien. And then I think after 1982, the appellate judges kind of think, oh, what have we done here? We've kind of gone too far, we've stretched it too far. And so then you've got the cases that are pulling back. And journal
mm,
articles will note that this is happening for the students. I mean, we will tell them as tutors that, you know, the concept has developed to this point and then it's got stretched to breaking point and we have to pull it. We have to pull it back. I mean, I say something in
mm,
lectures sometimes if I think I can get away with it, that kind of shocks students, but it's like you get to the cases in 1982 and the judges, the appellate judges is like kind of, oh, whoops, what have we done? What have we done here? It's like that night out that you've had and you wake up in a strange place the following morning and you have to do something to
yes.
and so then you
How are we
go,
gonna mend this?
the cases need to go back in another direction. And so the Hillsborough litigation is kind of part of that. And so when you're reading the journal articles, they give you the context. What's the context behind this case? What was going on um, for them to come to this decision? And then, as I mentioned before, I mentioned Mohammed and Morrison, which is
Mm,
um, what are the implications? So yes, you've got the case. You can be critical of the judgment, or you can agree with the judgment and say why you agree with the judgment, but you are getting different views. And so Mahmoud is another case in 2016. I think I've already kind of outlined the facts. When
mm,
people think, well, okay, what was the Supreme Court playing at here? The Court of Appeal had said it was not closely connected to his work. He'd been trained, they'd been told how
mm,
to deal with customers. There was no way that the Supreme Court, but you have to look at the reasoning. And you get it when you when you look at the reasoning. But
mm,
journal articles are useful for that as well, because I can remember the morning that this was handed down, and I read it on the Supreme Court, and I read the blog, and I thought, really? And I read the judgments, and I thought this is very tenuous. But again, when you read case notes, when you read journal articles, and that's really important for students, they can see that there are different views as to whether or not that was a good decision.
mm,
Um, but also, students can then say what they think. And I want students to say what they think. I want students to put, when they're doing their assignments, to say, and when they're using journal articles, to say X, Y, and Z argue this, whereas ABC argues this. It is submitted that a better view is this. So then they make themselves part of the conversation, part of that academic conversation. And then, so that's what I mean on the slide when I say, how does this line up with the views of other academics? Because the students are academics. They need to think of themselves in the same way that we say on the practice side, they should think of themselves as lawyers. They need to think of themselves as academics as well.
And it's a good point to be in, especially don't get too hung up on what a journal article says. Try to be in a position where you can contrast and compare what different authors say about different things, because then it makes it so much easier for you to either be on one side of the either side of the argument, or create your own, like Tina, you were suggesting. You're able to create inject that critical analysis, as well as developing your writing skills and your critical arguments for your work and your assessments and your or whatever it is that your academic writing, wherever it takes you. Yeah, this is fascinating. I think that all of these things we could just take days and days to talk about them, because you seem to be very easy to talk to, and you got the information as well. Do we have any ideas as to because at the beginning or previously we talked about what good journals students should look at, and I think one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how should they look for articles, and which should they read?
Right, so I would say a good place to start, and I think I'm not sure if it's on one of the slides that we've got.
Oh, we can move on to the next slide, because it might tie in with independent projects and dissertations. Obviously, it depends.
Yeah, so I think we've already said that. We've already suggested, I think, that students need to place themselves within the heart of the discussion. So, and this is really important when we're talking about independent projects or dissertations, because as I've indicated, you've got you're looking at an area of law or policy, and then you've got what people have written. And so I've said you've got lots of people going one way, then you've got a lot of people going a different way. So, for example, when at the beginning of this, you asked me a bit about my subject area for my thesis, and so I looked at, when I was doing my literature review, I looked at academics that seemed to support my view, but I also looked at the opposing arguments, and then sometimes you have to put them into themes as well, as to the different arguments as to why academics take a particular point of view. But to place yourselves in the argument and to be part of the discussion, you have to know what's been said. So that's why you have to read the articles, and you have to read from different journals, and you should ideally, even if you are researching for a seminar, ideally aim for referee journals. And being part of the discussion,
What do we mean by that, Tina? Referee journals?
So referee journals are journals that have been peer reviewed. So and it will indicate on that it's been refereed. So it's been peer reviewed. So the author has sent their journal in, the editors, the publishers have then sent the article out to a few academics, who would then come back with suggestions. But the important thing about referee journals is that there's rigor. So it's not a case of someone submitted a journal and it's just been accepted. It's got academic rigor. It's been sent out to other academics in the field who have come back, either with suggestions or to say, well, no, and then they've explained why it's a no.
Yes, that's why it's so difficult sometimes to actually submit journal articles because there's a lot of anxiety sometimes going into
Yeah,
submitting something like this because you could be very easily rejected. So yes,
yeah,
there is rigor, which is very good that
yeah,
students should be aware of. They don't, this is not Wikipedia, this is not Google. You don't just
yeah,
put some information there and nobody checks it, and then obviously other people's wrongly so take it for granted. This is,
yeah,
journal articles are the place where um, you'd hope, obviously, I'm sure that there are mistakes because we're human, aren't we?
yeah,
That you'll find in journal articles or updates that have not been made or cases that were used wrongly. But not blatantly so. That's
yeah,
why journal articles they're reliable sources.
yeah,
Their validity goes right up there, especially if they are peer reviewed.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, it's not just one. When if I do a review, I might be part of a team of 3 or 4 people, depending on because it's different. The journal or the article in question might have different specialities, different expertise involved, and so a different person for different part of it.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, it takes not just one person that reviews and says yay or nay. It
yeah,
takes a team of people for that work
yeah,
in conjunction with that particular journal.
yeah. For you to
Um,
know that it has credibility. So yeah, I mean, I used to say something I can't remember when I said it, or I might have read it. I probably
mm.
read it. I probably let me not let me not plagiarize. But it's like the dinner party analogy. It's like you're at a gathering and people are having a conversation and you want to join into that conversation, but you can't just jump in. You kind of stand kind of, everyone's in a semicircle or wherever or sitting around and you want to join into this conversation, but you need to listen to what everybody else has said before you interject. And it's like that,
Mm,
really. It's reading, especially if you are doing your dissertation. Your dissertation is going to be part of the discussion on a particular area. And for you
mm,
to involve yourself in that discussion, you need to read what other people have said, what other people have contributed to
yeah.
that discussion. Um,
Immerse yourself in the information, and then you're able to.
yeah,
Very often, do they not say if you speak less, you'll learn more, then
yeah,
you'll have something to say.
that,
So yeah, it's very good that you gave us the dinner party analogy because it does help and it is like anything. Don't just jump in because it's interesting to see, first of all, the perspective of those around you in
yeah,
whatever subject area it is that they're talking about, whether it's at a dinner or obviously as we're talking about journal articles and about a specific case or a specific area of law or issue that we might be dealing with.
yeah,
Tina, I do have a couple more questions. I know that you can just
yeah. I'm
talk about
sorry.
these
Yeah,
things.
I'm
I'm
sorry. I
fascinated.
could talk a
Um,
lot.
but I think a student would, let's say, we are talking about things for any level of student, that's for sure. But what if I'm a first year student and I don't know how to read a journal article? I've not seen one before, or maybe if I have, I don't really know that it is a journal article. So I'm now researching something, I'm doing my assessment, or I'm preparing for something, and I've come across a journal article. How do I read it and how do I use it?
Yeah, and how
I
do you
think.
find it as well?
Yes, as well. Yeah, how do you find it? I think you've got
Uh,
one of your slides also about
yeah,
that, isn't it?
yeah. So a good starting point is that we've got excellent resources at DMU, and
Mm,
so a good place to start is to go to the law subject guide. There are also 2 escape rooms that students should use, I would say. I know that in their first year, they do the first escape room, which takes you through how to look up sources. And then at level 5, I encourage students to do the advanced escape room. And within that isn't just for looking at, it's not just for looking for journal articles, but it does tell you how to do it. The other thing I would say is, so that's more for looking for things for a particular topic. The other thing I would say, if they've done a particular case and they wanted to find journal articles on that case, then you could go into Westlaw, for example. When you go into Westlaw, I would suggest then that you click on case analysis, and from case analysis, you go on to commentary references. And then when you click on that, that takes you to journal articles. I would also say that when you do that, try to go for the ones that are listed as full text available, because that gives you the whole article. The other thing
yes, it's a very good point that with the you will very often see the logo for a PDF, and that means that the document is available and you can access it. It's very tricky when you do your research and then you see some really interesting titles for journal articles, and you, darn it, I can't get access to it. So but sometimes I think the library is really good at sourcing these as well. So if someone finds a journal article that they can't get hold of, or the document is not available, you know, full text available is not there, you might just, you know, venture out and ask the library, because they might help you. Sorry, Tina, I interrupted your thoughts there.
That's very true. I mean, the other thing I've found with journal articles is when it's one that it looks like you can't have access. Sometimes if you go right back to the start of the library page and type in the author's name and the title, it may also come up, because we also subscribe to Hen Online. So it may be, so I've suggested that if it's first year, to go to Westlaw or Lexis Plus is the other one. And the other thing to say about that is, if the journal article isn't available through Westlaw, it might be available through Lexis Plus. So, for example, New Law Journal, I believe, is for Lexis Plus. But the other way is to, if you just type it in on the first landing page when you get onto the library site. Another thing that students can do if they're looking for a journal article for a seminar, an assignment, is textbook writers now make good suggestions at the end of each chapter. So, for example, the book I use for tort, Horsley and Rackley, Tort Law, they, at the end of their chapters, they have suggested further reading. So we go back to vicarious liability. If you look at the end of chapter 20 of Horsley and Rackley, which is available on Trove, so students, what's brilliant about DMU is students don't buy textbooks, they're on OUP Trove. You know, how blessed are they?
I know. I mean, law firms and places like, I mean, you know, chambers everywhere, that they need access to legal information. They all pay thousands and thousands to have access to all of these sources. It's amazing how they just, you've got it all at your fingertips, people. Yes, Law Trove, the library in general. You've got the databases. You've got obviously the library if you're a fan of a Smellinger book. Yes, it's all there for you guys. Yeah, brilliant.
But to make sure I've answered your question, because I've gone off
Mm.
the point again, I'm really sorry. How would
No.
a student um, find a journal article? So again, through good textbooks. So Horsley and Rattley for Taught. I'm pretty sure our colleague Andre's textbook in Contract, I'm pretty sure at the end of each chapter of his book, there is suggested further reading. So that directs you to, oh, are we okay?
No, we're good, we're good, we're good.
So
It
that
was just
directs
a switch,
you
yes.
to various articles. So then I think your other question was, well, how do you read them?
Mm.
So how do you read them? Well, the first thing I would say is if you are looking for journals for a particular subject, good journal articles start off with an abstract. So read the abstract first to make sure it's relevant for what you're doing. Because, you know, let's say your assignment's on vicarious liability. If you type in vicarious liability, there will be loads of articles. The next thing to do is make sure that you've got place a limit on the dates. So, you know, reduce your search to cases since 2020, for example.
Mm.
That brings it down. And then the other thing is to look at the abstract to make sure that it's relevant for what you want. When you're reading longer articles, so when you're reading articles from that you would access through Hen Online, for example, those come in sections, and sometimes at the start there will be a contents page. When you're reading those, I would suggest that you highlight. So now with articles online that are in PDF form, you can edit.
Mm.
So I would say, as you're reading, underline points as you go along, highlight points as you go along, and save the document at regular intervals so that by
Mm.
the time you've finished reading that article, you've got a saved version with all of your things highlighted. You've used the sticky notes function and made notes and argue with the writer as you're reading it. So you can use the sticky note to say, that's something.
Tina would say, this is rubbish.
Yeah,
Tina,
okay,
you
yeah,
didn't say it, I said it.
yeah. I
This is not
don't
that
agree with
great.
that. I don't agree with that. Here's why.
Yes.
But my point is, by the time
Mm.
you've finished reading the article, you've engaged in active reading. So you've annotated it, you've made
Mhm.
you're already engaging in an argument with the writer. And so
And I
and
think
you
also the
yeah,
valuable thing that the point that we could make for students here is that you would have already started your hard work for the assessment, the research that you're doing,
yeah,
putting these sticky notes and making it sometimes it is good to trust your instincts, isn't it?
yeah,
Right at the start. So if you're reading something instead
yeah,
of letting it sit with you because you're
yeah,
reading and you've got so many to go through,
yeah,
putting your thoughts there
yeah,
straight away without
yeah,
forgetting, because we're human, we're going to
yeah,
forget things, would make it easier for you at the end of it. So all of that time and the work that you've put into
yeah,
going through the journal article is adding up, and then when you're really starting to write, to put it on paper
yeah,
and to gather all of your information from wherever you've collated it, then
yeah,
it's so much easier for you, isn't it? Like a no-brainer, and you keep flipping through them and or flicking, not flipping through them necessarily,
yeah,
and you'll see how your decision or your points are more similar to X author than to
and
Y
why,
author,
yeah,
or
yeah,
and sometimes these journal articles they talk about themselves, aren't they?
yeah,
Because they refer to the information. They do the same thing that you're trying to do. So, you know, there's also value in looking at journal articles for that reason, because they give you a glance and a framework, I suppose, a pattern that you can use yourself to develop arguments when you're, you know, to do that analysis and compare and contrast what authors say in other journal articles. So very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Super. One last thought for the students, Tina,
Yeah.
about journal articles. What would that be?
I would say read as many as you can, but read them as appropriate. And there are different types of article for different types of work. So I would say for your seminars and assignments, you're looking at case notes, but when you are doing, you know, more extensive work, or like, you know, when you're doing research work at level 6, and for projects, then definitely go for the refereed journals. And also place yourself, I think another theme I hope I've put across is place yourself within the discussion, because you the students, you are academics too.
But they get to contribute to knowledge, don't they? There's that, you know, in dissertations, for example. Obviously, we're not expecting first year students, you know, this is not the message that we're putting out there. You need to reinvent the wheel. You need to, you know, contribute to knowledge straight up from the beginning. It's a skill and it is developed over a number of years. But obviously, it is a skill that you can develop in your first year. You know, if you take all of these tips and the knowledge, you know, from all of these podcasts. I mean, there's a mountain of information that can be very helpful in preparation for your first year. You know, for tackling your first assessment, second assessment, all of the assessments, really, for that matter. But yes, pay attention to what you're not so good at and get better at it, you know, and get to know your weaknesses and your strengths, obviously, because you can play on some and get better at the others. So yeah, this has been fascinating, Dina. uh, Thank you very much.
No, thank you, and I'm sorry I talked so much.
Oh, I'm not sorry you're talking. I'm really glad. I mean, the
Always
students are.
if you ask me anything.
We can do another one very soon, Tina. Don't worry. I love the fact that you can give students very straightforward and frank information, and you know it is all from experience, and it's you've been doing it for so many years, and we can talk about pitfalls. We can talk about, obviously we only have so much time within this time, and there's no point focusing on the negative part of how not to read a journal article and how not to use, you know, which journal articles not to use. But I think because we've focused on which ones to use, the students will be in a good position, I think, to get them started, especially if they're in their first year, because it's never too early to start with this. Well, Tina, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you, and thank you for unlocking this topic of how to read and use a journal article. For you guys out there, thank you very much for listening and for watching us, and we look forward to having you watching the next one. Take care and see you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.